but actually it's not. White hides all sins. All defects are hidden under white paint. Black paint is what shows everything, and you can kind of see that here. It is mostly it's a fact that, I don't want to sound scientific by saying, oh, it's because black reflects all light, or absorbs it or whatever it is, but it's just a darker color, so it appears more reflective. You see more of the reflection in it, and that's when you see all the little defects and things like that on car paint. And on the black glazed alligator, look at that. That is like looking at a mirror. Just marvelous. So, Colt, I hope you're watching. This is yours. It's almost done, so kurahi. This one's going to be very pretty when it's all done. Like I said, I just got to do... The edges are not dressed yet, so if you look there, you can kind of see striation in there. I haven't done those yet. So counting that, looks like we've got... Should be about 6 to 7 layers that make this up here on the edges there. So that turned out nice. Lots of edge finishing to do yet, but that's going to be something I work on through the week. I'm very excited to take photos of that. That's going to be a very fun one. What I'm working on today is one for a fellow who's been waiting very patiently. This is going to be more or less a standard mid-wallet design. As you probably could surmise from the thumbnail image, it's going to be using the steel gray museum calf, which is this stuff here, and it's going to be paired with a cherry glazed alligator exterior. So this one's going to be very pretty. Not two colors you would necessarily think immediately would work well together, but they really do. They look awesome. So it's going to be this on the inside with the alligator on the outside, and then a nice red cherry stitch to pull it all together. Oh, good, Colt, you're here. Yeah, I know I promised that I would message you when I started on it, but I just said, hell, I'm just going to do it and surprise him with pictures of it when it's done. So this was as good. I'm glad you tuned in and saw that. So yep, that one's yours. From Amtan, there is a bit of a variation in the thickness of the hides, and it usually has to do with how, well, number one, with how large the hide is. Generally, a larger hide will be thicker, but also the finish on it. You have to remember, the glazed finish is actually a burnish. It's not something that's applied to it. It is a rubbed-on, burnished finish. So when you have that, you're getting some compression of the fibers and of the skin. So they oftentimes, not always, but usually will be a hair thinner than like the matte and the Millennium finish. Matte and Millennium are usually a little spongier, a little thicker, and a little hairier on the backside just because they're not compressed the same way glazed is. You have to take into account for that. The upside to that is all of them are relatively easy to split. I find that glazed is easier to split than matte, but they work pretty well through the bell skyver regardless. So that was how I did that. I took that for the cherry money clip and took all of it down to around 0.5 to maybe 0.6 or 7 millimeters thick, so under a millimeter thick, and then it's laminated together with either with the calfskin for the card so or with it itself for everything else. But it's pretty dicey doing that because you run into those soft spots between the scales. You get greater pressure there from the presser foot, and you'll go through them on occasion. So it is not a fun thing to do, and it is not something I would attempt to do live on camera. So that's where we find ourselves here today. It was also Mother's Day yesterday, so happy Mother's Day to any of you watching. My moms, all 4 of them usually watch. I have my mother and my mother-in-law. I have my aunt, which is my godmother, who usually watches. And then my next-door neighbor, Rachel, who is my other mother. So I have a lot of moms that watch this stream. So happy Mother's Day to all of you. Day late and $1 short as usual, but you won't mind. I'll cook for you. It'll be fine. It is a beautiful day here in Ohio. My wife is out in the garden right now. She's been waiting for the weather to break. So she's out there. She'll be coming in and out during the day, so just if you see her, definitely do not say wife spotted in chat. Definitely don't do that if you see her walking around behind me there. So you can blame her for the reason there will be no cats in the stream today, just because with her coming in and out, I don't have them out here. This workshop leads directly to outside, so there will be guaranteed no kitties in the stream today. If you've tuned in for that, I apologize. I hate to disappoint you, but I figured I'd let you down now rather than keep you waiting. So we'll get going here in just a second. Drink of water there. Put the keyboard out of sight here. So, as usual, I took the liberty of doing some of the more boring things and getting that out of the way for you. I've got most of the pieces cut here and ready to go. We've got our 2 interior card slots. These will be the outer card slots, and these here will be the upper parts. And you can kind of see how that gets assembled here. I use Salpa for the interior, for the structure there, so all the pieces get stitched and glued to this, which then gets covered up on the back side. This is basically a bonded leather. They take leather scraps and glue them all together. And people hear the term bonded leather and they kind of get nervous, but most people making wallets like this or things using various materials mixed together will be using some kind of bonded leather inside of it there. And the key to remember is that all leather has a use and a purpose, and it's about identifying what the right use is. And in this case, bonded leather gets a bad rap because a lot of places overseas will make cheap wallets, and they'll use just cheap bonded leather for the outside, and it naturally wears away and falls apart. And that is the wrong use for that. But for something like this, for a structural piece on the inside that gets covered up completely and is never seen, it works great for that. So it is a great way of using an inexpensive material that is purpose-built for this. It is made to be structural, it is made to be a stiffener, things like that. And if you're using it for that, that's the correct use. If you're making the whole wallet out of this stuff, that's the incorrect use. So it falls down to you to know what you're using and how to use it. So I've had a couple people question me with that, oh, do you use any bonded leather and things like that? And the answer is almost always, especially on exotic wallets, yes, I use a lot of it. But I use it correctly. So with that said, we're going to start with, we got a couple things to take care of first before we can go ahead and assemble this. As you can see, we have to put the pieces together yet. We have to attach the lines, or attach the lining to each piece. So, can we get alive more often? I'm trying to. Like I said, I like to do them every Monday. I skipped last Monday just because I was doing something rather weird. I'm hoping to keep doing it next week as well, get back into the routine of it. My next thing I'm going to do after this project, I'm going to do another video. So I don't know if I'll be streaming or not, but I'm going to do another proper, probably with the music and everything, the video and all that stuff. So I'm going to do that next. I don't know how long that'll take me because I'm going to be doing something I have not done before. But that will be the next thing in line. So we'll see. I'm hoping to be here again next Monday, but if I'm not, I'll definitely let you guys know. But generally speaking, every Monday at noon, we'll be here. The biggest trouble I had with transitioning to doing this full time was I went from being an auto painter to this, and in the at least in the production paint business, shops live and die by the week. The week is everything. So I built my whole life around knowing where in the week we were, what day it was, and suddenly, within a couple days of transitioning, it didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter what day it was. So I like doing it on Mondays because that kind of gives me a start to the week. It frames everything for me. It's like, okay, it's time to work. The weekend's over. Let's do the thing and get it done. So I like doing it on Mondays. I'm open to the idea of doing it on another day at a different time for some of the other time zones. But, yeah, talk about that later. We should probably actually do some work and quit talking here. I'm going to set these aside. I'm going to start with doing, so these here are the outer card slots. These are pretty simple. These just get glued, just laminated, two pieces together. So we're going to do these first. I have a piece of wax paper here that I lay down, just because this is kind of messy. It's an inelegant way of doing this, but it is, really, there's not much of a different way to do it. Take the glue spreader. This is the Sewa water-based glue. It is very much like Elmer's glue. Looks the same, feels the same, tastes the same. It is pretty much that. It's PVA-based glue. There's not a whole lot to say about it. If you've used Elmer's, it's pretty much identical. Take the glass slicker. There. And the edges of these are skived. So you want to pay particular attention to the edges to make sure that you're working down along that kind of little ramp it makes there. If we get a little bit of glue on the backside, it's okay. It doesn't matter. This being a water-based glue, it wipes right off with just a moist paper towel. Well, Dustin, I'm glad you enjoy it. I do this as much for myself as for other people. I actually really like doing it. Sometimes it's nice to just have the company. So it's just kind of nice to be able to talk through these things. And when I was sharing this with my full-time job, there were a lot of times when I would just not feel like doing anything. And funny enough, I found that streaming on Instagram Live was a great way to restore my motivation. Just by interacting with people and talking about the thing I was doing, it would build my motivation back up. So I'm glad to hear that people appreciate it. I'm glad that you enjoy it. I've had a couple people ask me, hey, do you have a Patreon or something like that that I can donate to? I don't really do that kind of thing, just because it just never sat right with me. I'm just not that kind of guy. But YouTube did notify me that it lets me do now, I guess, a super sticker kind of thing. Yeah, it tastes like Elmer's. It's about the same. Not much different there. But I guess there's a thing that you can buy a sticker for chat. I don't really know how that works, but if you're so inclined to do that and you enjoy the stream, feel free to do that. I also discovered a button today that I didn't know existed in the YouTube Stream Studio. That is insert an ad. So I'm going to try that when usually I take a break to hit the head and grab a drink of water around an hour or so in. So I'm going to give you a fair warning right now. At about 1 o'clock Eastern Time, when I do the BRB screen, I'm going to try inserting an advertisement. We're going to see what happens. I love that it gives you the option to manually do that, because the idea of saying, oh man, hey, I'm going to stream, hop in, and getting a bunch of friends in, and then just immediately triggering an ad for them, just to screw them, is tremendously funny to me for some reason. So we're going to see if it works or not. That's it for these two. These are now laminated together. That's it. Got two pieces glued together here. We're going to let those set for a little bit. They're cut oversized, so we're going to trim them to shape later on. At that point, we'll double check and make sure that our glue bonded, that we don't have any delamination between panels there. We can always insert a little bit of glue there before we trim it, and that'll be good. Did that cost you $5? I think I owe you a refund for that. We'll figure that one out afterwards. We'll square up when we're done. God bless you. These ones here, these are the V slots. So these are the ones that go like this. Or they're you got me all flustered with that sticker. It's distracting me. But thank you. That's quite humorous. These are the ones that go behind those outer slots. They're kind of the interior middle slots. And rather than being two pieces of leather, this one here is a single piece folded over the top. And there's a reason I do that, which I will show you when I get to it here, but just for now, understand that there was a reason I did these two differently. These ones here, there's a good way of doing this. You can see that I've kind of made some guidelines here. This one on the top is the fold point. This one here is the actual end of the fold here. We're going to mark this out real simple, like with a bit of low-tack tape. Yeah, Burke, I know, I keep forgetting to mess with the Minecraft server. I'll get to it eventually. We're taking a piece of low-tack tape and we're putting it across that bottom line there. This is where our fold is going to terminate. Take this, work some glue in there, and we're going to need a good bit of glue. This calf skin is very stiff, even thin. This is only about a 0.5 millimeter thin. It is very stiff and fibrous, so it tends to want to fight being folded. You want to have a good bit of glue in there. Adding more glue will mean you'll have to work it for a longer period of time before it cures, but you'll get a better cure out of it. If that makes sense. Like if you're using super glue, how a lot of super glue doesn't ever dry, but when it does, it usually is a pretty good bond. It's the same kind of concept. So we've got that covered there. We're going to get the glass slicker out. First, we're going to just manually line that up to the edge there. And again, using our tape line, that makes it very easy to tell where that has to go. Working up, and we're working, to take my finger and work up to the center, and then push out. This way, we're working our glue towards the outer edge there. We're going to take our glass slicker. You can see it's already being a pain. It doesn't really want to fold down. I find that the best way to do this is just to take the glass slicker, just hold it flat for a minute against it. Just hold it straight down, and that kind of works out any large air bubbles or things like that that didn't get pushed out to the side. That's a trick I learned from doing decal work on vehicles. You want to start from the center and work your way out. That way nothing gets trapped in the center. So now with that having been held down a little bit, we're going to put more pressure on it using the edge of the glass slicker. Again, working generally from the inside to the outside. And because this is the back side of the card slot, you can really be aggressive. You can bullet down there, because even if you leave any marks or things like that, this is the back side of the card slot. It is never seen, it is only felt. When you flip it over and work the other side, which we're going to do now, you want to be a little more ginger with it. That there is now a fully lined card slot. That worked pretty well. Now, if you're looking at that, if you're doing this and you find this looks a little lumpy along the top edge of that, bear in mind that it's not done yet. We're going to crease it afterwards, and the crease will take out any little defects or things like that and actually kind of straighten that edge out. So if you're trying this for the first time and you find that your fold looks kind of messy, do not despair. Wait until you crease it and assess it from there. Let's do the next one. Let's do the other one here. Even though this is low tack tape, this should be good enough to hold it in place. Here. Now, a word of notification here. I don't know when the last time I changed my microphone batteries was. So if I suddenly stop transmitting and it looks like I'm talking, please do let me know. I don't think it's going to happen on this stream, and I'm going to have to change them after this one, but it could happen, so keep an eye out for that and holler at me if it does. A great way to let me know that the microphone is not working is to buy a bunch of stickers and put them in chat. That's a joke. Don't do that. That was a bad joke. Disregard that. Again, getting a good bit of glue on here. I like using these Amy Roke plastic spreaders because they're pretty good at gripping the glue, and they if you get anything where you don't want it to, they're also good at kind of scooping it up out of the way. Again, just lining it up visually with the top edge of the tape there. Tacking down the bottom edge, work up towards the middle, and then work your way out towards the edges. Very good. So again, we're going to take a slicker, just press flat against it. Good there. There's a small conference going on in my yard between my wife and my brother. I live here in a small suburb of Youngstown, and I'm very blessed to have most of my family living on the street with me. So I've got my neighbor to my left, Rick, who's basically family. I've got my other mother, Rachel, on the other side of me, then my godmother, then my parents, then my brother, and then at one time I actually had my cousin living down at the other end of the street too. So it's the family circle here. I have the biggest yard of anybody for some reason, which is not something I'm particularly keen on because I hate mowing grass. But that ends up being that my yard is generally where people kind of walk through and congregate because they're looking at all my wife's flowers and plants that she has. So usually in the morning, I can find 2 or 3 people just in my yard, just having coffee and just congregating, which is endlessly funny to me. Side there. There we go. So, we have our pieces all done. Howdy. Howdy indeed. So we've got our 4 card slots made up here. Lined on both sides. These ones only need to come down this far. You could bring them down to the full length if you want. I choose not to, because I find that makes it so I don't need to bother skiving anything on the bottom down there. If I just leave it half length, this is already 0.5 millimeters. It doesn't need any special work or skives or things like that. It's just ready to go. So we're ready to get these trimmed into an actual proper shape now. Go ahead and do that. We can put the wax paper away. Up. I usually just keep a piece of wax paper handy just for gluing and things like that. If you flip it over and fold it over, you can get a lot of use out of just one sheet. I know some people use silicone mats and things like that. That's far too bougie for me. So on the front side of these, you see I've got these marked out already. Get our knife. And what we're going to do first, you can see on my template here, this line stretching across there is the top edge of the bottom card slots. That's where it lines up. And to get a nice flush joint there, we have to trim a little notch on each side there. I've already marked it out with white gel pen, but I'm going to double check and make sure that it's actually correct here. So forgive me, I'm probably going to put my head in front of the camera as I do this, but you kind of got to get right down on top of it to make sure. Here, falling here. Here. And one important thing to note with this is you don't want to come in too far, because at least on my design, it has this little scallop on the top edge of the bottom card slot. So if you come in too far with that notch, you actually get into the part where it dips down, and you'll see the cut. You kind of want to be careful of that, depending on how your design is arranged. Forgive me, I'm getting in the way, I know, but take a second. Here. There's nothing really too scientific about this, just cutting a little notch out, and we'll trim off the excess here. There's a fully formed card slot. We're going to crease this next. Let's go ahead and get the other ones ready too. While I'm doing that, I'm going to turn the creaser on. This box was made for me. This is actually a laser cut wooden creasing box. It was made for me by a friend and colleague, Michael Milan. I asked him, as you know, I have two very robust cats, and they were kind of interested in the tips for the filetus. I said, hey, could you make me a box to cover the thing up? So he did. This is what he made for me. So it's laser cut. He cut it all out, sent me the parts, and I glued it together, and it works wonderfully. Very sadly, he passed away. I think it was 2020. We lost him. He was a very, very skilled leather worker and just a nice guy all around. Being someone who is online pretty much all the time, I think it is very important to meet your online friends, colleagues. You never know when your number's up. Now, I think I have trimmed that one a little short. I sure did. Look at me, I'm sitting here talking all metaphysical and metaphorical. I trimmed it about a half a millimeter too short, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're trying to do the stitch line arrangement, it kind of matters. So I think I'm going to remake this one here. I've been asked a couple times, but this is kind of convenient because I've had a couple people ask me, how do you determine when to keep going with a mistake or scrap it and redo it? And it just kind of depends on what the mistake is and where it is. With this thing here, with the stitch line, there's not a lot of room for error, especially with a contrasting stitch like this one. So in this case, even though it's only a millimeter, about a mil off, it will stand out enough to where I'm like, I don't really like that. I'd rather it be right. And this being just a single, you can see this is not that much. It didn't take me that long to make. So I'm just going to opt to simply remake this piece rather than have to fight it later on. So put that in the scrap bin for future use. I guess you'll get to see me make one from the start. On this particular design, you notice this one says outer edge on the outside. That's because this design has curved edges. So what that's accounting for, that outer edge is referring to this line here, which is actually at an angle compared to this line in here, which is perfectly perpendicular. So that's why this one has a specifically noted outer edge. When you look at next to the outer card slot, you can see light on there. You can see the curve of the outside edge there. It's very hard to notice on this because it's just they're just two straight lines. So I specifically noted on there so I would be able to tell which one is which. But otherwise, on most of my other designs, they are generally just perfectly mirrored. This one here is the only one that's really different. see. Calfskin out again. This is the Zonta calfskin, which I maintain is a made-up tannery. But no, it's actually not. It's from Spain. I acquired this from a very dear friend of mine in London. He's known for selling some of it in the Leathercraft Discord Classified. So if you want to pick up some of this for yourself, this is akin to the Ilcia Spanish museum calf that's sold on Rocky Mountain Leather. This is almost exactly the same stuff, just from a different tannery, but basically more or less the same. This finish that's on here is done with a dye, from what I understand. And I'm not quite sure how they do it, but that finish is called the museum finish, and it's commonly used for shoes and things like that. Right side. Again, when we're just kind of doing this, there's not a lot of need to be very scientific with it. See, I'm just eyeballing most of this. I don't know if you can hear that bird outside or not, but it's angry about something. Good grief. Go measure. Top there. That was pretty close as is, but actually I'm going to make my margins on the back. Fold. And there we go. That's all we need to do for that. Two. And pardon me for a moment, I'm just going to run this with the bell skiver real quick. I'll be right back. Yep. I don't know if you can... Actually, you can see that a little bit. I just went ahead. I didn't skive the bottom edge because it doesn't need it. It's already still just 0.5 millimeter. But I did skive 2 outside edges, the angled interior, and across the top to make this blend a little bit better. That bell skiver took it down from about 0.5 millimeter to about 1/4 millimeter on the edge there, which when you're folding stuff matters quite a lot. It doesn't seem like a 1/10 of a millimeter could make a big difference, but when you're folding things over and over and then stacking them on top of each other, it does matter a lot. So accurate skiving is really critical for wallets like this that are made of lots of different individual layers. The next tool purchase, that's a good question. I honestly don't know. I don't really have much need for anything at this point. I'm pretty well equipped. Probably the next long goal is going to be a band splitter. That's really the big thing. Being able to split things myself without having to rely on a distributor or a third party to do it opens up a lot of capability. It means I can order direct from supplier, direct from tannery, without having to worry about sending it, to either to Columbia, Oregon, or Rocky Mountain Leather to have them split it for me. I just do it all in-house to whatever thickness I want. Now, everybody who owns a band splitter will always tell you, the grass is always greener. They're not all they're cracked up to be. They're just a pain in the butt. But I don't know. Like many great fools of the day, I think I can do it just fine. So I'm going to find out myself. Unfortunately, they're about 15 grand on the low end, so that's a bit of a stretch goal, but we'll see. Anything can happen. I have to hustle a lot of wallets for that. But otherwise, for hand tools and things like that, I really do not want for anything. I'm pretty happy with what I've got. I'm probably going to have my father-in-law turn me a new scratch-all on his lathe. We were looking at some ironwood for a handle. I'm still using just the basic Tandy scratch all. He did get me a scribe that I've been using, which is quite nice. For actually marking lines. A clicker is something I've looked at. Yeah, that a three-phase converter is probably how I was going to do it. At my paint shop, if I still had it, I actually was running on three-phase there already. So I had the hopes of, if I could do it sooner, I could just bring it to the shop, just wire directly into the three-phase line that I had there. But no, I'll just have to do it with a phase converter. So as you can see, I've just been talking about this. I remade this part here. It really didn't take long to do. This is not a very difficult or complicated method of doing this, but it pays dividends because it feels really nice to use. So if you haven't done this before, if you haven't tried laminating or doing the folded edges, I strongly recommend it because it makes a very nice product. The other big advantage of it is that now this top edge is dressed. Doesn't need painted, doesn't need burnished, it's done. We crease it and that's it. These two down here will be different, but we're going to get to that once I make this. So let's see if I managed to not screw it up this time. And I know I'm getting in front of the camera. Forgive me. I think it's important to show mistakes. So anytime I make a really dumb mistake, I usually try to remember to post it on my Instagram. Just because there are a lot of people out there who look at this stuff and think, I can't do that. That guy's perfect. He never messes up. But the reality of it is, nah, I mess up quite a bit. It's just kind of the nature of it, just how it goes. It's important to be honest about that because you don't want people to get the wrong idea and get discouraged unnecessarily. Okay. So that wasn't so bad. We didn't lose a whole lot of time on that. Oh, very cool. I have a bunch of Fordite. It is unstabilized. If you're interested in it, let me know. Made it myself. So we're gonna get back to these here. So now we're gonna do these other two pieces here. And like I said, before we go ahead and trim them to shape, we're gonna check and make sure that they're fully laminated. And sometimes when you're being economical with the glue, it doesn't quite get all the way out to the edges there. That's why you test it beforehand. You can always work glue back into the edge up until you've put the thing together and put it in the mail. So you've always got time to kind of rework that. You can see I'm just taking the glue spreader, working it in there. It happens from time to time. And especially with museum cap, I notice it happens quite a bit because when it's split, it gets a very, very smooth flesh side. There's not a lot of rough flesh for it to grip, so you're almost effectively gluing two smooth ends together. You either have to use a lot of glue or you kind of have to work back through it and re-glue things, I find. Or maybe it's just me, I don't know. Who knows? Possible. Let's check the other one too. Yeah, I have a couple pounds of it. This one's glued up good. We're good there. If you shoot me a message on Instagram, I'll holler at you. It's a variation of pretty much everything from catalyzed acrylic enamel to just uncatalyzed base to clear and everything. There's all kind of different colors and I mug with that one. All kind of stuff going on in that big old chunks of Fordite. That's right about. Good. Now we're going to take this and we're going to mark out our shape. Now this here, I'm just going to use my scribe because it's visible enough against this material that I don't need to use the gel pen. And also my gel pen is starting to run a bit dry, so I'm kind of saving it for when I really need it. I had a container of 4 or 5 of them, and when I cleaned my shop out in January, I put them somewhere in the shop. I just haven't got any idea where they are. I'll have to figure that out. Now I'm going to trim this top edge here, and then we're going to crease the edge. Our creaser's nice and hot now. I like to try to do that in one stroke if I can. That did pretty good. Very good there. So the reason I didn't do these the same way, the reason these are just two pieces glued back to back, there's two reasons for that. The first of which is this angle on the top, this scalloped top there. One of the big advantages, like I mentioned earlier, of doing the folded edge is that it dresses the edge automatically. There's no burnishing or painting needed. Since we're cutting this shape in here, it automatically makes that moot. So there's no reason to do that. The other reason is that these are on the outside. So these are the ones that are visible on the outside, the interior of the wallet. And the reason you don't want to basically do a kind of a halfway mark with that is when you have it visible on the outside, even if it's a very clean skive, if it's a very clean transition, you will always eventually, even if not at the start, but eventually you will always see that line there. So I do these with a full length, two pieces glued back to back, runs all the way to the bottom, and that masks any kind of line there from where that's built up. That's the reason I do it this way. Let's get the marble block out, and we're going to go ahead and crease this. I have a piece of scrap here that I already folded and glued, and we're going to do a test crease on this first to make sure that our, number one, that our creasing tip is hot enough, and also to make sure that it's not too hot. Like I've said a couple times before, this is a Chinese creasing unit. It's good, it's very economical, but unlike some of the more expensive ones, it does not have great temperature regulation, so it will tend to run on temperature if it sits for a while. So doing this on a piece of scrap first bleeds off a bit of the excess heat, and it prevents you from burning something that you wouldn't want to burn. That looks pretty good there. I think we're set. We're going to crease the back side first, because with this creasing tip, it rounds the edge just a hair. This kind of means I don't really have to do any beveling or rounding or things like that. The creasing tip just kind of does it all for me. And museum calf being very, very dense, it requires a couple good passes to really get a nice crease on it. You can do it with additional heat, but I don't like to do that. I would rather use less heat and make more passes, because if you slip with the creaser, you can fix that pretty decently. If you burn it, it's over. So actually, I've discovered while I did this, I had a little bit of delamination along the top there. Before I go any further, work some glue in there. Don't know why I'm having so much trouble with that today. Not to worry, though. Not only does this get glued, it's going to be edge painted as well, which is effectively its own separate layer of glue. I'm going to let that dry for a minute. We'll do the V-slots while that dries up. Then we're going to start with the back. And remember how I talked about how if you're worried about fold looking a little rough, here's where all of that gets taken care of. Pressing really hard on the back. You can get away with that on the back side. That's already smoothed that out considerably. Forgive me, I quit streaming for a week and I forgot where my camera is positioned, so if I'm a little low, just holler at me. And as always, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, I generally think I cover most of it with the narration, but if I've missed something, please do ask. Always happy to answer questions. If you have any questions after the stream, feel free to email me or get me on Instagram. I'm always happy to clarify. That looks pretty smart. Put these side by side so you can kind of see the difference there. I don't know how well that renders on your screen, but there's a pretty big difference between the way these two look here, and that's, again, mostly just because of the creasing. The extra pressure, extra smoothing, that helps a lot. I'm gonna say, I think I need a little bit more glue in this one here, but this one is really surprising me today. Worked with museum calf fairly regularly. Oh, I had a lot of, I don't know what happened with that one. Rushton, you sold me some bum museum calf. I'm genuinely shocked by that development. In this case, I'm actually going to go from the outside in because I want to work glue further into the center of that to make sure that's all adequately covered. And there we go. Once that glue stops, back out the other side there. So that should pull it. I don't know how that happened. Losing my edge. We're going to let that set up for a second. We'll come back to the other one that we re-glued. Good grief. Bit of glue on that edge. Nice thing about water-based glue is even if you get it where you don't want it to, it wipes up very, very easily. Key is to get it before it really dries. But even when it's dried, it'll still lift off with just a little bit of water and a damp cloth. There. Go back to this. Even with a bit of difficulty, not the end of the world. It is a name brand fileteuse. This is the CMDA Chong or Mason brand. They're, I think they're a little bit less common now. I think the distributor's a little harder to contact than he was before. And I know there have been some very competitive options from like Crimson Hide, Rocky Mountain Leather. Pardon me. Allergy season. There are some very competitive options now that can be sourced through the states that are easier to get than this one. But back in the day, that was the back in the day, 5 years ago, that was the easiest option to get for the best price. Because otherwise, you'll spend a couple $1,000s trying to get them from the French distributors, and they're not much better than that. I think right now the best bang for the buck is the Crimson Hides ones, or the ones that Rocky Mountain Leather carries, which I think are just white label Crimson Hides units. I could be wrong. Somebody who has one could correct me on that. Ben, that's a good question. I generally don't buy anything for myself unless I see it and I immediately know what I want to use it for, or if the deal is just too good. Hold on, I gotta blow my nose. Pardon me. Oh, where'd my tissue go? You know what? I'm going to answer your question in a second. I'm going to put the BRB screen on. I'll be right back. I'm going to grab some more water, hit the head, and I'll be back in a minute. Let's see if this ad works. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, where were we? I have a tissue now. Having seasonal allergies in spring is tough, but they do. So what I was talking about, I generally don't buy leather unless it's either a very good deal or I'm just particularly taken with it. I generally try to have a product in mind when I buy something. That's usually the advice I give people. If you are buying leather, know what you're going to do with it, and that prevents you from spending a lot of money on things that you end up not using. Um, with customers and things like that, I generally will try to steer them towards things I have on hand already because it's easier and I can take photos of and things like that. But occasionally you will find somebody who wants something specific, in which case I'll try to get a sample of it or something like that. I know Rocky Mountain Leather will now do samples of all of their Chev and things like that, so I'm probably going to order a bunch of that. I have the sample cards already, but it doesn't have all of them on there. But in general, I try to stick with what I have. Usually the only things I try to order specially are Chev goatskin for the color distribution, the color availability of it, and alligator. But otherwise, for all my made-to-order stuff, I generally stock a specific set group of colors, and I work with that. So the short answer is know what you want to use it for before you buy it. That's the good sound advice. So let's see where we were at here. We're going to do a little bit of glue coming out of the top edge of this here. Oh, there's my aunt pulled up out front talking with my wife. My wife is out front gardening, and here I am at the workbench. My aunt is going to the store, and she's chatting with her. So I'm going to take these two edges here. Now, like I said, these got cut, so they have to be finished somehow. I'm going to mix up some paint to paint the top of them real quick. I don't have a gray, but I do have white and black, so that's good enough. Got my little color mixing dishes here, and you can see they're pretty well used. Get some paint. White. Very good. This is just Uniters. Buy it from Rocky Mountain Leather. After a lot of back and forth, I think I've come to the conclusion that Venice, or Fenice, the Italian paint, is superior to Uniters, but only by a very small margin. We're going to start. We need more white than we do black. Take my old scratch all. And all the paint that's in there already is well hardened up, so it doesn't really matter. You would have to drop some alcohol or something like that in there to really loosen it up and get some color bleed. But for how little we're actually going to use, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to take just a little bit of black on the edge of my awl here. When you're mixing color, less is more. Very easy to screw up and over tint something. But we need to come darker yet, so we need another bead of black in there. And we need very little of this. Fenice, I find, dries harder. It's got a noticeable stiffer temper to it. And for the way I paint, I do a lot of buffing and dry buffing. I find that works better for me. I guess the correct way to put it would be Uniters or Fenice is the superior paint for how I edge paint. Like many things with leatherworking, every person has a different way of doing edge painting. And so if it works for you, whatever's getting results for you, great. I certainly get good results from Uniters, but I think I just prefer Fenice, so I'm probably going to start switching over and ordering that. I'm just adding in a drop of black at a time and mixing it through there. Tippity all, look at that's getting pretty close. I think one more drop of black is going to do it. And for just the tops of the card slots, we need very, very, very little of this. We'll mix up some more when we do the interior edges of the card slot banks. But for now, this is all we're going to need. So, that, I think, there. I'm going to do one more drop of black. Just one more. It's a darker gray than I thought it was, actually. I probably could have done equal parts white and black now that I think of it. Try that next time. I think that's good enough. I'm going to hit this with a little bit of 320 first, just to get any loose bits of glue that may have seeped out of the seam there. I'm just going to take my fingertip. Using surface tension, just kind of running it along the top of the edge there. If you get any spillage, it doesn't matter. Keep your damp cloth handy. There. That'll do. Now that's just our first coat, so it doesn't matter if that's lumpy or rough. That's going to get heat spread down. Right now, what we really want is coverage. So when we do hit it with the fill tubes, we melt it into those fibers, and we get a nice, strong bond there. That's not only giving us a good layer to paint from, but also giving us good additional adhesion at that top edge. We're laying it on kind of thick there. Anything that gets spilled over, you just take your little moist towel that you've got there and wipe it off. Paint cleans up very easily when it's wet. It is much harder to clean up when it is dry. So pay attention as you're applying it and make sure that you're cleaning it up as you go if you do have any spills. We're going to stick these over here by the window. Because nothing will dry paint better than airflow. Except maybe a little bit of heat and some airflow. But airflow is the key. And while those are setting up, these two are good to go. We're going to go ahead and get these applied here. You can see the top parts of the card slots I've got glued down, already ready to go. We're just going to take the scribe, scuff the salpa a little bit to get some good bond there. And for this, I'm not going to use the Sewa glue. I'm going to use the Aqualim contact glue. Just because I find it works better on Chev and calfskin and things like that. This works really good on most things that are veg tan. This works really good on most things that are chrome tanned. And I couldn't tell you the how or why. That's just been my experience with it. Off the back sides of this. Pull up the fibers. I forgot to ask, did the advertisement play? I pressed the button. I have no idea if that worked or not. Let me know. There we go. Set. Take this and I'm stirring it by swirling it in a circle. I'm trying not to put any bubbles in it. Only need a little bit. Emily? Wait for that. If you find with this that you put a little more down than you want, you can always lift it up. The glue spreader. Keep working it elsewhere. That dry. With warm weather like this, generally by the time I'm done putting the glue on all the pieces, they're ready to go together. Here. Have a small fan or a small heater or something like that handy. You can dry this glue a little quicker. I've seen people keep hair dryers handy for that purpose. That certainly works well. But on a day like today, we don't really need any help with that. Those there and let those dry. The thread I'm going to use is going to be this color. This is going to go to accent the exterior, which generally is what I like to do. If I'm doing a mix of colors, I like to accent the exterior rather than the interior for a couple of reasons. Aesthetically, I find that looks better, and with the way I punch my stitching holes, I punch from the inside out. I find that the exterior ends up being the back side of my stitch, and that sometimes is difficult to keep perfectly aligned or things like that. So this way, if you do have any slight variation in your stitch, it becomes very difficult to notice because the thread is the same color as the back, or very close to it. So that's a little trick I like to do with that as well. When you're doing stuff like the black and yellow wallet, you have no such recourse, so you have to just be careful with it. But in things like this, whenever I can, I try to do it that way just because it makes it a little less harrowing to punch the stitches there. One is almost dried. Give it just another minute out there. Any questions about what I've done today, please do ask. Alright, I think we're good to go with that. Looking at my guides here. This one goes with this one, very good. And you can see that I've already marked everything out on the piece here, so I pretty much know where everything goes. Obviously, it lines up with the bottom of that, but everything is all marked out pretty explicitly. Take that, lining up the exterior lines there, and working that up. We're pushing this up as tight as we can against this gap to make sure there's no visible openings or gaps there. Take that, press that down. Use the glass slicker to really work that down. And as I'm pressing it with the glass slicker, I'm taking it and I'm pressing it up, pressing it forward like that, so that if I'm doing that, if I'm pressing it down and it shifts at all, it's going to shift again to tighten against that piece there. Down, there. A little bit of additional motivation there. We'll do the same with this one. Looking at our guidelines, lining those up. And up against the seam there. There we go. Okay. You can see now we're starting to get that's starting to look like a wallet now. I have about 4 or 5 different colors of calf skin, again, that I bought from Rushton. My goat skin, I've got about 8 or 9, and I just kind of, as I go, I keep acquiring it, either when people request it, or if I see something that's particularly fetching, or if I just, bought it for myself. So I try to get larger sizes of the hides whenever I can, so that when I'm done with something, I have some left over, and I'm able to kind of build my inventory that way. Glue sticking on that there, we'll wipe that off. Now we're going to go ahead and stitch these down. And by the time we're done stitching these two down, that paint should be good and dry on the top of our other 2 card slots. We can hit it with the fileteuse. Hello, Rushton. Good to have you here, my friend. And again, after punching the holes, even though it doesn't matter, it's just good practice. Hammer those closed a little bit. Say that it doesn't matter because these stitches will never be visible. They'll be covered on both sides, but it's good to do it. Good to remain in the habit of doing that. And another good habit that I like to do is I'm going to thread all of my needles now. In this case, I've only got to stitch the 2 card slots, so I only need 2 runs of thread. I find it's easier to keep the momentum going when you don't have to stop and re-thread needles when you have them all done and ready to go. My wife went to Cedar Point yesterday with her mom, ride roller coasters, and she sent me a picture of a really good breakfast she had at a diner. And she sent me a picture of one of the biggest, fluffiest pancakes I'd ever seen. Now I just have in my mind that I really want a pancake, even though it's already 1 o'clock. Ugh, it's going to be tough to get over. Russian, I am pairing cherry glazed alligator with it, and if you give me a hot second, I'll grab it and let you see. It's in the thumbnail of the stream, but I realize I haven't actually shown the stuff yet, so give me just a moment and I'll grab it. Oh, there's our needles ready to go. Let me get that alligator, I'll show you. And baked beans. Get this guy out of my stream. Baked beans, unbelievable. Yeah, it's going to be very pretty. Yeah, so that gray is going to work really nice contrast with the cherry on the outside. Haven't 100% decided what I'm going to use for the exterior yet. Probably this piece here. Oh yeah, it's got to be that. It's got to be that piece right there. That's gorgeous. Look at that. Another option would be to use this section of the tail. This would also be nice. But I think it's going to have to be that. I like when I can get transitions of scales not only small from the outside to the inside, but I also like these lower regions of the belly where you get some of these small scales near the sacrum that transition into larger scales up. I think that's very fetching. That's going to be a nice one. Wrap this back up until we're ready. I've got a couple alligators that I haven't done anything with yet that were really beautiful, and I couldn't resist buying them, but I haven't had a chance to use them yet. I have one nice hand-dyed Japanese skin, really pretty. Haven't done a thing with it yet. But I know what I want to do with it, I just haven't done that yet, so here. Yeah, anytime I'm stitching, I run the needle through the thread, just because it's good practice. It makes it easier, you don't have to worry about dropping them. So, let's check our... Oh, good. So that mix that I did, mixing paint is a little tricky because it will always flash down a little bit and change color after it dries. So it looked a little light when we did it, but now, looking at it there, that's pretty much dead nuts on, as I would have said if I was still in the paint business. Guess I am in a different kind of way now. So we're going to take the fill too. So this is heated pretty hot. This is, let's see. My digital thermometer gives me conflicting readings on this, but you know what? While we got it here, let's see what it says. Can't be right. Hold on. God, it doesn't seem to know what's going on. It has no idea. I've tried to get a reading of the temperature that I heat paint to, and try as I might, I am absolutely unable to figure it out. My laser thermometer, my infrared thermometer does not want to comply with that. So I've had it tell me that this is anywhere from 300 to 600 degrees. Yeah, it's hot. That's about it. Greetings to Tomas. Glad to have you here. But we're going to take the quote-unquote hot fileteuse and we're going to spread the paint around a little bit. So you should be able to catch a bit of the smoke that comes off of that. Got to get a little closer to it to really see it. Taking that, what we're looking for with this, any rough patches, any little valleys or dips or things like that, we're going to spread the paint to fill it. If I'm doing this, I'm perpendicular over the edge right now to smooth it, and then I'm going to take it after I do that. I'm going to run it on the 45 over each edge there. And this will take any paint that kind of spread out and spilled over the lip, work it back into the center. You can kind of roll the paint back in there. Side now. I get a lot of questions about a lot of my painted edges that don't get stitched. People say, is that safe? Is that okay? Yes. If you do your paint right, if you have one of these and you can melt it into the fibers, it effectively becomes another layer of glue. It is very tough. So be free of fear if you have just an edge with no stitching and just paint holding it. It will be very tough. Same thing on this one here. Perpendicular over the top, flatten that paint out, fill any creases, smooth out any rough patches, things like that. We're going to go back over the 45s. We're taking paint that got smushed over the edge and rolling it back towards the center. We're slowly rolling the tool back flat again as we roll that back into the center. We're going to do the other side. Back up, and to me, unfortunately, I don't think my camera's catching, but I can clearly see that the layer is rolling up. I'm rolling the edge of paint back into the center and smoothing it back down in the middle. That's what you want. There we go. So that's all done. So now these are dressed. We mixed up some paint to match that. That's pretty good. I like that. That's looking pretty good there. So now we're going to let this cool for a second. We'll come back and finish this in just a minute. So let's go ahead and get these stitched first. Again, for just doing these, I don't think I'm going to bother moving that camera yet. When I do the longer run of stitch and I do the hidden back stitch, I'll shift it then. But for now, we're just going to leave that as it is. We'll get to that in a second. So focus on this camera for now. You did send me Brown Museum. Yes, you did. Send me a couple different colors of Brown Museum. Send me brown, blue, taupe, steel gray, and the Bordeaux. For which I am very grateful. I owe you for that. I had somebody ask me, I was actually, so if you're familiar with the channel Walletopia, he did a review of one of my wallets. Very nice guy. Interesting thing about the Walletopia guy is that he buys all of the wallets he reviews. He does not receive them, because I offered to send him. I was like, hey, early in 2020, I was like, I've never done this before. I see your channel. I'd love to send you something to review. And he said, well, that's very kind of you, but I would insist on purchasing it. And he did. He bought an alligator wallet from him. Now, I gave him a good discount for it, but still, I appreciated the sentiment. And we were actually going to do, he and I were doing an interview, and we did it. We did it over camera. The interview was done, but it never, he never posted it, so I don't know why. But he asked me a good question, and that was, with so many people doing leatherworking, and a lot of people, making wallets, Do you find that a problem? Is it difficult to compete? Do you have a lot of trouble between people making and trying to sell the same kind of thing? My answer to that was no. And this is a great example of it. This leather I got. Hey, thanks for the sub. This leather that I got here is actually from Rushton. Found it for me, sourced it for me, even split it for me and mailed it to me. And I have here. And then in another case, I have a customer who's going back and forth on a couple of different colors, and he is looking at something that I don't have in stock. I wasn't able to give him a direct sample of it, but I knew another colleague had just used it, so I asked him, like, hey, would you cut me a small piece of this and mail it to me so I can see what it looks like? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And it's very wonderful to have that kind of cooperation between people who would nominally be competing with one another, but we really don't. You've heard the old adage, a rising tide lifts all ships, and that seems to be very true in our neck of the woods. It's very gratifying to be part of a community that helps one another in this way. I would not be half the crafts person I am without the advice and help of all the other people around the world, doing the same thing I'm doing. So that's definitely been the best part, is just getting to interact with colleagues, interacting with customers. It is good, clean fun. Here's the first one stitched. The UPS truck parked outside of my house, so apologize for the beeping if that's coming through. Take that. Here's another good tip while it's in my brain. If you're working with a contrasting stitch and you have a couple of different options for them, now is a great time to test your stitch choices. I already kind of know this is the one I want, but if I had one or two of them, I would stitch one T-slot in one color and the other in another color, and then take a look at them and compare them. There's nothing better than actually having it on the product and seeing it in person to determine if this is the one you want. So these never get seen. They're all covered up, so you're perfectly fine to just kind of experiment with them. Oh, I'm sitting here looking for where the other T-slot is, and it's already in the pony, so go figure. So at this point, I would ask any questions about anything I've done here. Oh, you know what? I realized I didn't update my making today thing. I'm already slipping. You break the routine for 1 week and it ruins you. Speaking of Walletopia, I had a pretty fun experience over the past 2 weeks. I had a fellow reach out to me who had seen my the review of the mid wallet I did on Walletopia, and actually lives in my hometown, which is it's a small town. I think there's only about 10,000 people in it altogether, maybe 10 or 15, but it's not big. Is the long and short of it. And he had found me. I actually went and met with him. I drove over to his house. I got to use my briefcase. I filled it up full of samples and things like that, and I drove my old car over there, and we had coffee. We had coffee in his dining room and talked about cars and wallets for a good 2 hours and had a great time. So his is going to be coming up in a little bit. It's a full ring lizard mid wallet, same pattern as this, but made out of the ring lizard. So that's going to be very, very interesting. Yeah, you know what? I could choose to say that it was my fault that I didn't update the ticker on the bottom, but I'm going to choose to say instead that it's your fault for not telling me. So shame on you for not notifying me that I was wrong. This is all your fault. How dare you? Okay. I enjoy these wallets because other than getting all the pieces together, they're very quick to go together, actually. It takes longer to make all the individual parts than it does to put them together. Cool. There we go. All right. Stir up my paint again real quick. I'm going to do one last coat of paint, very, very thin. I'm going to hit this with just a little bit of 600 grit. Smooth out any little nibs that might have developed in there. Doesn't need to smooth it out very much. Unfortunately, Steve, there will be no cats today. Like I said, my wife is out in the garden. She's kind of coming in and out. And my porch here goes directly to the outside. So there's too much of a risk of one of them running out. What I'm doing here is I just hit it with a bit of 600 grit just to smooth it out. And I'm just taking a very thin coat of the paint and just wiping it on with my fingertip. And this is more just for consistency of color than anything else. Just covering up anything that may have been sanded through by the high grit there. Wipe the edge real quick. And that's going to dry super quickly. Only about a minute or so. And then we're going to hit that with a dry buff. That'll finish those off there. And then we'll be able to attach those. While we're waiting for that to set up, we could still do something else. Even though there are no cats out here, I'm going to continue with my good habit of policing up all my thread and needles. Throw that away. I'm told that that length of thread there is a cat killer length, because they like to eat thread, and it can apparently get tied up in a knot inside their little guts, so very problematic. So I'm always extra careful about making sure I get those policed up immediately. I'm going to take the scribe again. That's making a good mess here. We're going to prepare a couple things here. Off our edges. Preparation of gluing those card slots on. You usually get a pretty good bond to Salpa as is, but I like to do this anyway, again, just out of good habit. You don't need to be too crazy with it. You do really need to scuff the calf skin. That needs an aggressive scuff to pull those fibers up, but the Salpa, not so much. Now you may be thinking, well, it's time to put those card slots on, but you'd be wrong. I mentioned before that we were going to line the back sides of these. And for that I have these were two pieces of the calf skin that ended up getting split particularly thin on the edges. So that works very fine for my purposes. We're going to put these very, very thin spots on the outside edge. Let's see here. Let's go ahead. Up. This is going to be a little bit messy, so we're going to take... Actually, it's going to be a lot messy. It's going to be quite a bit messy. Take the Sable glue back out. And I like to do this. I like to glue the liners on before I glue the outside card slots on. Just because it lets me have direct access to press against the backside here. I'm using everything in 0.5 millimeter. I like to use the Salpa because it lets me kind of assemble this in 3 different pieces, and then that prevents me from having any steps or ridges on the joints where the card slots go together. So this is just how I do it. As with leatherworking, for most things, there are many different ways of doing the same thing, and your method will probably be different, but this is how I like to do it. Whatever works for you, if it's working, must be good. This is the Dreadnought way. That may be your way, but it's not the Dreadnought way. When you're working with leather this thin, you want to be careful with these water-based glues. You don't want to put on too much, because it can actually soak through it in some cases. So even though I'm putting on a good amount there, I'm trying to spread it fairly quickly. And in light of my experience, the other area is delaminating. I'm going to put a second wet coat on there. I think it might have been that just the leather was so dry, it might have absorbed it quite a bit. Sets up. And like I said, no real elegant way of doing this. Just there. There we go. I've hidden my glass slicker underneath the fricking irons. Using the slicker, kind of press down, work that out to the edges there. Back a little bit. So there's our backside covered up. And you know, with something that thin, yes, you can see the ridge of the stitch there. But again, you'll never see this. You'll only ever feel it. Yeah, that very hilarious gif of me using a lot of glue. I like to use a lot of glue. I have no problem using large amounts of glue. I mean, let's be honest, that's still not a quarter amount of glue, so cut me some slack. Other side here, and again, we're taking this very thin split portion of it and putting it to the outside edge. We would have wanted to skive that anyway. Might as well make use of it. It's not going to be good for anything other than a liner, so let's use it for a liner. When it comes to gluing, I would say use as much glue as is safely practicable. I've even heard there are people who weigh the amount of glue they use in a project. I think that's getting a little excessive, but to each their own. There we go. There. We'll let that glue set up for a second, and we'll come back to these here. Find my, there we go. And like I said, we're just going to do a dry buff with just a piece of canvas. I find uniters, and especially Venice or Fenice, responds very, very nicely to an aggressive dry buff. No wax, no alcohol needed for this step, just doing it just dry, just canvas over dry paint. Getting a bit of friction on it, a little bit of heat. Good. And that'll take down, you'll notice that sometimes you get a little bit of dirt nibs or things like that, or small little globs. A lot of that will come out with this dry buff. There we go. I am very, very pleased with that color mix. That is just spot on. Very happy with that. Now, we need to scuff the back sides of these. Yeah, I'm all for tracking your material use, but I think that's a little excessive. One. There we go. Get the other glue out. side to dry. Now we'll put it on Salpa that we scuffed up. This is a contact glue, so it has to go on both sides. You can tell this glue is ready. Changes from looking kind of white and milky to just transparent. That means it's ready to go. Okay. Now, before we put these on here, as is usual, I'm going to stick a card in the preceding card slot, just to give a little extra space underneath. It makes it so that when you're using these card slots, when you have a card in the back slot, this one is ready to go to accept another one. It's not overly tight, it's not overly loose, it's just a little bit nicer this way. I don't need the bone folder. I think I'll just use the glass slicker for this. Let's see which. This one. This one. I'm going to do this one first. This one has to dry a little. I want to get that top edge lined first. Starting there, pushing that up as tight as we can. Starting there. Those of you asking about cats, half an hour until their lunchtime. So they're on the door behind me, pressing up against it. If you look back right about where my fingertip is, you might be able to see one of them back there. Looking all hungry and lonely. Feed me. There we go. That one's good to go. Let's do the next one. That down nice and flat with the glass slicker. Get a nice amount of pressure there to really seat that home. There we go. Quite nice. I like that. Yeah, we'll go just because Rushton asked. Perfect. Now we're ready to do the interior edge stitch. Got this nice, all lined, all put together. Looking very handsome. Well, not looking very handsome yet. It still looks a bit of a mess just because it's all kind of rough edges. But once we get these edges trimmed, stitched, and creased, it's going to look very nice. Go ahead and do that. I think I have just enough left in my gel pen to do this. So I'm going to take my template here. Now we're going to trace the actual final dimensions. Piece. Come on, baby. I know you got enough ink in you to do just this for me. Come on. So, that'll be the final dimension of that. I always trim first. I know other people stitch first and then trim, but I'm just of the camp that trims first. Yes, I know I'm in front of the camera. Forgive me. Yeah, it can be fairly brutal making wallets Russian. Both my wife and I were surprised at just what a noisy craft this is. Hammering and hooting and hollering and all sorts of things. There we go. So there's the final dimensions for what this will be. Again, you notice I generally do about 1/8 of an inch around the edge. That gives me a good trim there. Let's go ahead and do that now. Take my low tack tape. I'm going to try to anchor it down. I'm anchoring it down on the outside of the margin there. Because again, even with low tack tape, you can lift grain occasionally if you're not careful. Ruler. Go. Lovely. Here's our there. That'll answer, I think. This one down, put in the same spot. I like using this long ruler because it flexes enough to let me put pressure on the front and back of it as well. And it doesn't tend to rock. It keeps it in place. I know there was a big hullabaloo, I think a week or 2 weeks ago, about using a metal backed ruler or only ever using a corked back ruler. All hogwash, if you ask me. There we go. Here are our 2 pieces. Ready to go. I'm taking a moment here to look again just to make sure that all my edges are fully glued. And I see a little bit is lifted again. I'm going to work a bit of glue in there. Press it down in there. After it's stitched and edge painted, this will probably have been moot anyway, but I like to do it just because. Good to be thorough. There. I like to add a lot of it to the edge and then press it down in like that. Take my glass slicker and work it down again. There we go. I'm happy with that. Go ahead and mark a stitch margin. Take our pricking irons and make sure everything lines up, and it does just perfectly. You can look there. You can see just perfectly how the tines of the teeth are aligning with the top edges of those card slots. That's why I ended up remaking that V-slot earlier. Because even though it was off just about a millimeter, even a half a millimeter, that's enough to be a big difference there. So it's important to get that right. Checking. Good look down the length of it. Straight. Good. Nope, the curved edges go to the outside. Need to drive that through again real quick. Almost lost it there. Might get through to the backside fully on that. So that one's ready to stitch. Let's do the other one. Starting off with making sure our tines are lined properly with the card slots. They are. If you're having trouble with a wavy stitch line, get down low and look at the alignment of it, because that's how you'll be. From the top, it can be deceptively straight, but when you're down low, you'll notice it a bit more if you're off. That's an old trick from pinstriping. There we go. I think it's Time who does the curves on the inside. He's Romanian, so he does everything backwards from me. He's a good man, just don't let him have any orange juice near your projects. Okay. Now, like I mentioned earlier about hammering the stitches, now these ones will be very clearly visible, so we do definitely want to hammer these first. The purpose of that is it closes them up both before and after the stitching. It makes it a little tighter, a little easier to keep a consistent angle to the stitch. Okay. Probably way more thread than I need, but, well, better to have too much than not enough. I think I'll get these two stitched and then call it a day, because it's going on 2 o'clock here already. For these ones here, I am going to adjust the camera so that you can actually see what I'm doing, and I'll try to, once again, give another quick demonstration of that hidden backstitch for anybody who missed it the first time. Trying to decide if I'm going to keep working after the stream, or I'm going to take some time outside. It is just an incredible day. We only get so many nice days here in Ohio. Yes, Rushton's timeline of events is 100% accurate. Give me a minute, I'm going to put the Be Right Back screen on while I adjust the camera here. Just stand by. Okay. There we go. That should be good enough, I think. Yeah, the curved edges, I find they really, really dress it up. Funny enough, I get a lot of people asking for straight lines and straight edges and things like that. And I'm always bummed out. Just 'cause, don't you like my nice curves? Yes, I stitch away. I don't know why. I just found that comfortable. It's kind of how it happened. But I'm glad that's been a value to you. It's certainly been valuable to me. Some folks will charge you $100 for that knowledge. I give it away for free. And as is my custom, double stitch over the tops of the card slots. More for aesthetics than anything else. Well, I suppose you do get a little bit of extra strength from that, but for me it's really about preserving the look of the stitch line more than anything else. Oh yeah, that is the right thread color. I am very happy with that. God, that looks good against the steel gray. I've been excited to make this one because I've wanted to do this color combination for a while now. And people have been kind of shying away from the grays for some reason. Even though I sent them pictures of it and they were like, oh, that looks nice, but I think I want to do something else. I'm glad that this gentleman chose the gray. I think this is very, very pretty. Design and lines are something I could do an episode on at some point. I have to figure out how I want to present it. Doing things subtly is the difficult part. It's easy to go overboard. It's easy to do too much. But it's really difficult to do just enough where the effect is visible. It doesn't disappear. A little more glue there. That's a good idea, right? I never thought of that. Hey, look, it's my brother. I did poke myself once a couple weeks ago. I had the needle flip around in my finger and just poke directly into my thumb, and it bled like crazy. I had to go wrap it up, and it was a mess. I was very unhappy. uh, yeah, I feel that, Thomas. All right, so here we are at the hidden backstitch. I think I've unfortunately started right when some guy has started his weed whacker across the street, so forgive me for that. But what you're looking at here, this is the front side of it. I'm try to. Oh, hang on, I got an idea. Hold up. See if I can't raise that a bit closer to you. There we go. Okay. So I've got. Yeah, of course, it's the nicest day of the week. Why don't you weed whack? For Christ's sake. Anyway, I'm 3 stitch holes from the end. That's generally what I do. You can do 3 or 5. I like 3, but just kind of play it by ear depending on where that stitch is going to end. Starting at 3, it's been saddle stitched the whole point with 2 needles. We get to this and we're going to drop the 1. We're going to drop 1 needle and convert to a running stitch. We're going in on one side, in on one side, and we're going back in, coming in from the other side. So there's 2 stitches there. So there, if you look, you can see how that's kind of broken up there, how we've kind of skipped that stitch there. Now we're coming back on the other side. We're going to come back through. And when you're doing this, you want to be angling the needle to replicate the appearance of the saddle stitch. You'll notice we're coming down. We're coming out of the bottom there. And we're going to go in high up here. And you can kind of do that. You can put the needle up high, or if you hold your fingernail, you can kind of direct where that thread goes. In high. I'm actually going to push it up with my thumb there. If you look at that there, there's the back stitch. Now it's a little off yet. Once we hammer that, that's gonna look a lot cleaner. Pick out thread there, and then just basically finish it how we would any other. Holy God, that mower was loud. I guess it's a good thing that I'm wrapping it up anyway here. There we go. We got a nice little bow there. Put some glue on it. I pull it through so that the glue gets pulled through the holes with it. Snip it as quickly as we can, and I'm going to take my awl, and I'm just pushing the end of the thread back into the hole. And you want to do this as quickly as you can. You want to do it before that glue sets, but you can take it out, hammer it. There's our back stitch. Now it looks, if you look for where it is, you can pick it out. But if you weren't looking specifically for it, you'd have a tough time finding it. I'm going to put the camera back real quick. Let's go ahead and crease that, because the crease matters a lot for this. That if you look for it, you can kind of pick it out still. But once you put that final crease against that, it really kind of blends away. think I'm going to end the stream after this just because of Joe Lawnmower across the street here. Apologies for that, but it is just about time anyway, so. I got the guy mowing the lawn. There's a guy on a bicycle stopping to talk to my wife. He was asking about my Navy flag. Perfectly nice, quiet morning, and then just Distraction City. Trying to figure out how the camera works. So there we go. So there's our card slots there. All creased up. Line on the back. Ready to go. So this one's ready to go for the interior of that wallet. I think, like I said, I think I'm going to call it here for the day. It's 2 o'clock, so I usually try to do it for about 2 hours. Again, I thank you all for joining me. I apologize for skipping last week, but it was for good reason. I will be back again next Monday. If you have any suggestions or questions about the stream, things you'd like to cover, or questions about today, please do email me or reach out to me on Instagram. It's always my pleasure to answer that. Again, always looking for feedback on the stream. Thank you again for joining me today. This one I hope to finish up in another couple of days, and you'll see some pictures of it on Instagram, so keep an eye out for that, and then we'll move on to the next one. So thank you very much, and have a good day.